So, hello, I am picking up channel and chats with some people that inspire and I love to speak to. That's what this series is about. And also to bring through creativity, spiritual truth, and soul frequencies. And on that note, we were just talking, and I'll let you introduce yourself first before we dive in, and then go back to the soul. So, hello, lovely to be with you today.
Lovely to
Yeah.
be with you too, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me on your beautiful platform. So for people who don't know me, I'm Rachel Vaughan, and I have a very interesting background,
Yeah.
just to put it mildly.
Yeah. And
That's
I'll,
one thing I didn't ask before we came on is obviously this is going on YouTube.
Mhm.
Right. I
Yeah.
know what to say now.
Yeah. So we might have a little code going on it.
Yeah.
I've talked about a lot of stuff, had a little warning. Yeah, but I don't feel that my passion, and we've just been speaking about this, is to bring spiritual truth to everything that I can. I feel that that is the blue ray, angelic consciousness, the need to speak the truth. For me, it comes out a lot as a theatre maker, needing to speak the soul's truth. And I find that you have a very similar frequency, which you were just mentioning before we hit record.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
first came to what you were talking about at Fergus Greenwood's Spiritual War Talk. Before that, I went down to visit him and he said, "Listen to this. I just want to play you this video." And it was your video that you made. And I sat there and I watched it. I just looked at him afterwards and went, there's so much psychic truth in that. There's so much. I was like, that's literally what I channel when I work the lands and I see all the magical abuse that has taken place across many, many lifetimes on the lands. What you were bringing through was just, yeah, phenomenal. So, yeah, thank you for doing your work. And let's start there. So, what is because you're doing a lot of stuff at the moment, and I definitely want to talk about Ley Love Down and all of that. Where would you like to start with it all?
Well, maybe I'll just introduce myself, but I'll just be really careful with my language.
Mm.
So I grew up in a cult family. And so the lineage goes back to the Kennedys. And interestingly, my grandmother, oh, sorry, yeah, my paternal grandmother did the genealogy for my family and got back to a Catherine Kennedy, and then she just stopped. She didn't bother to go any further. So she clearly had a real interest in finding that we had that lineage. And for those who are not aware, that's one of the 13 bloodline families. Um, she was a OAM recipient, which is equivalent to your OBE, and we all know how many special people get an OBE.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't have anything personal against her. I don't have any memories of abuse from her, but my father, her son, was horrific. So he has been named in mainstream news as a person of interest in a specific disappearance of children called the Beaumont children, 3 children who went missing from the same family, the only 3 children that they had. So they were taken in 66. And, there's all these numbers that are really significant as well. It was the 26th of January, 1966. That was just the tip of the iceberg of what my father was involved in. There were 106 boys who went missing from a local boys' home, which was a couple of streets from where I grew up. There were tunnels. I've exposed those tunnels and I've proven the existence of those tunnels. I was trafficked through those tunnels by my father. I call him Australia's Epstein. There was intergenerational abuse. I mean, it goes back to, the grandmother I mentioned, her father was Grand President of the Grand Lodge, so a very high up Mason, gentleman, not a gentleman, I never met him, thankfully, called Joseph Wright. So people don't seem to realise, or they're coming to realise, that people from Freemasonic orders tend to sell their children into certain situations. So there was medical experimentation. My father was into I'll just say SRA, so that doesn't use
Mm.
any bad language. And so I was used in those sorts of situations. And one of those factors was that some of these were open air rituals, which is where, obviously you have an interest in these healing the land. I was not fully conscious of this as a child, but there's a reason why these I call them creatures because they've lost all their humanity. These creatures do these open air rituals. And in order to do that, they have to have the judiciary all stitched up, police, park rangers. Everybody has to be in the club to a certain degree, or the high up level, so that they can squash any kind of allegations, because this is out in the open. A lot of it's done at night, but it's still out in the open. And one particular ritual that I was involved in, I was about 10. It started in the afternoon. So so they weren't even trying to hide it. And this is a public park. So one of the reasons they do that is they want to infuse the Earth's ley lines, which are like her meridians, like the meridians of the human body. The ley lines of the planet, in my opinion, are her meridians. They want to infuse this horror, terror, misery into those ley lines, particularly where they cross and they create vortex spaces, or portals is what I like to call them. Those are multidimensional spaces, and I'd love to hear your idea about what I'm describing here.
Yeah.
Um, where all the other doorways to all the other realms exist. And so what they do is they will unalive some innocent, use their inversion magic, and open up a dark doorway, because death opens a doorway. And so this is why it's so important to talk about these things, because they wouldn't do it in the open air in country locations, or this is a park in Adelaide, in a city, if it wasn't really important. And it is so significant and important to them. So my passion now, I've been speaking about my childhood, and I finally got a victim of crime compensation payment. So I've finally been acknowledged for the abuse that happened to me.
Wow.
My passion now is to awaken people to the importance of ley lines and their portal spaces and what is going on in these spaces, and to help balance out all of this horrible negative stuff that I personally witnessed. I know a lot of other people who've gone through the same thing in these open air rituals. That's my passion now. So that's where Ley Love Down comes into play.
Yeah. And so that's exactly how I connected with you, because I was speaking out about the Hellfire Caves in Ireland, and I went to visit
Wow.
them on top of a mound. And the reason I went is because I was doing some a witch's wheel of karma through the whole year, through the portal dates, the solstices, the different things that summer solstice, what everyone talks about, Samhain, but I was bringing through the satanic things that happen on these dates as well as the sacred, because it felt like so many people in the healing community just worship these as sacred dates, and I was like, we cannot ignore what's going on these dates. So I was doing a year of that, working with um, Ema Stassen, who's brought a lot through about the witches stuff. And we were doing this one thing, and this little boy came through to me, and he went missing in Ireland when he was young, and he lived down the road from Ema, and he came through when we were doing a healing session together, and he said, come to Ireland, I need to show you something. And so I got on a flight and I went over and I visited her, and Ema's from Ireland originally. We went to the Hellfire's Cave, which is on sacred lands. It's around sacred stones. I thought it was very interesting. The boy that went missing is called Philip Khan, and there was a Khan on the top of the hill. And I was like, this is clever.
Wow.
This is clever what they're doing. I got to the top of the hill and I started to remote view, which is psychic viewing or seeing through the veil. And he showed me the whole of the ritual that took place there. And I was horrified. But what I could see was this ritual was conjuring up a frequency fence. And what I was remote viewing was there was a frequency fence. So the children that had died on that land, and I was equally horrified because it was like, there's people walking their dogs around this park. So this is open land, and this has been taken hold of. And people are looking at a hellfire cave. It's called a hellfire cave. I mean, these things aren't even shouldn't even be there. Like, it's all written for anyone to see, even if you don't see through the veil. And I was seeing that this frequency fence, because if you die in fear, which is some of the work that I do as a soul guide to get souls over to the other side when they get stuck, you're going to get stuck. But actually, magically, they were doing something even more clever, which was really getting these energetic fields. So there wasn't a way out. And so I was on the top of that hill shipping souls out, shipping souls out. And I was
Wow.
like, no, 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 no. I understand magic. You're not putting that frequency fence around them or any children. And so my passion is because I've seen it as a psychic medium and I've seen it in my timelines. My past lives are full of this kind of horrific magical abuse. So I've already always bought into it, not from this lifetime, but from seeing it down the ages and through seeing it psychically now. So that's why I feel so passionate about it. But I don't think we need why I go and do warrior work is because we need to undo the magic that they've done and understand it so that the soul guides can help people on so that no soul is stuck. That's part of my mission. So when I heard
Which
you
is
talk,
brilliant.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
When I heard you talk about what you'd experienced, some of that on Fergus's talk, I was like, this is exactly what I remote you. This is exactly what's going on. And I often find people don't talk about the level of the magic abuse and that particularly, well, children are beautifully psychic anyway, but there's that level of attack as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Freemasons are really obsessed with shocking the vagus nerve. So that's a nerve that goes all the way from the mouth all the way to the other end of that passage. And they'll go from the other end. And in the worst version of that, if the victim survives, there can be a thing called chronic reversed polarity where the chakras can actually end up swapped. And
Wow.
this is where you get a lot of psychopathy. You can get a really high level psychic, but you can get a psychopathic psychic because they have a red aura.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and they do this intentionally. And the myriad of health problems that will cause in the human body is astounding. But they actually believe, and this is one of their tenets, that they need to do this shock to the vagus nerve from the lower end before the age of 3. So, I mean, this is obviously quite horrific, and I don't want to go into it too much, but there was a situation where that happened to me at 2.5, and that's one of the specifics to me being compensated. And this was also the MO of a series of murders that occurred in my state, called the family murders that my father was also involved in. And yet they won't look at him for those abuses and those murders. So he's deceased, and I was told by a special crimes unit detective that you can't convict a corpse. So they just want to let it go, and they just want to ignore it. And this is part of the problem with all of these things that happen. People don't want to look at the dark, and they don't want to investigate it, that's for sure, because, again, my father was Australia's Epstein, so he had a lot of blackmail material, and we're still trying to find. There were canisters, old milk canisters, those big old milk canisters that used to get in the 50s, and he apparently bitumised the outside of them so they wouldn't rust, and kept his blackmail material in there. And my brother was waiting 10 years? 10 years to have an interview with the Major Crime Department here about what he saw. And they were only ever interested, and I've watched the film of the interview, and all they really wanted to know was where the canisters were. So we're still looking for those, and we will find them, and that'll just open up a massive Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Which my father would have made the canisters like that on purpose, because that's the way his mind worked. I think you were the person that told our mutual friend about psychopumping, which I've been speaking about in interviews ever since, because I'd never heard the term before.
How do you
So
not?
you're a psychopumper?
Yes.
No, no, never.
Wow.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah, so basically there's so many things to pick up on what you just said. My first play, Awaken, is about being a psychopomp. And the whole play was set
Wow.
out to heal. I was killed for being a witch in the 17th century, which is why I wrote my play. I wanted to know, this is what started me on this whole journey, why someone like me was killed as a witch. I remote viewed it in a healing session, and I was like, why? Then the play got bigger. And I say to people, what I understand now, it was the witches that killed the witches. So the not good side of the craft killed the healer witches. And it actually downloaded to me. I was like, I literally was like, you've missed a point. And then Freemasonry came in, and I was like channeling all this stuff. And I was like, whoa. It was like I was unraveling all this stuff. But interestingly, I was writing a scene once about a year ago, and I got a demonic attack in at night, and a demon literally came on and sat on my neck in the middle of the night. I was completely paralyzed. Now I've spoken about this before, and I said I do not consent 3 times, and on the third time it released. But what I felt was an energy of fear shoot down from my neck, the vagus nerve here, into the vagus nerve at the bottom. And I knew
Wow.
this entity knew about the vagus nerve because about a month before I kept going, oh, this is my problem with my vagus nerve. And I was studying it quite a bit. And then that entity came in and I thought, oh, it's sending shock down my vagus nerve. And I was in a really terrified state. So when you said that, I thought, I know this stuff. This is what I've experienced.
Yeah.
The level of understanding of the energy and the fight or flight, what's going on in your body. They're like a healer reversed, that they know this stuff. So when people go, oh, the chakras, love and light, I'm like, learn your chakras, master them. This is your body temple because they know it. They know it too. So
Yeah.
you've got to reclaim them, release all these cords, and know how to soothe your own energetic soul.
And I've been shot down by other people who've had similar childhoods to me for
Right.
daring to use my abilities, because that was another way that I was experimented on. I was used as a MK Ultra tool. So my father basically sold me for experimentation in many ways. And I was psychically trained under that system. But that doesn't mean I certainly don't use that now. What I was trained to do was to spy on people, remote view, as you said, pick up on people's soul frequencies. And I feel terribly guilty about this, but I was very small.
Mm.
I had some telekinetic abilities, which are only just starting to come back online. So they used me as a spy, I suppose, which was a bit of a joke because my father was an ASIO operative, which is the equivalent of MI5, MI6. So he was a spy as well. He worked as a telecommunications officer, tapping people's phone lines, but he was really working for ASIO, doing the same thing. So what I like to point out to people is, so part of the programming for people who go through cult abuses and SRA and MK Ultra psychic training is that you must step away from any kind of psychic work when you come out of it. That's a training that's been programmed in, along with many of the other programs like Unaliving Yourself and etc. What that does, though, it leaves you completely vulnerable. So just because you step away from that work and you don't use those abilities anymore doesn't mean that the dark doesn't know that you have those abilities and that you're still a danger to them. And they'll come after you, but you've shut everything down. So you might have all of these problems with physical health, mental health, and not recognize that you're being psychically attacked because you haven't got that assistance. Those other senses aren't online. So I like to take the opportunity occasionally to sort of point that out, because I have come under fire for daring to do this. I like to say that I was honed as a tool, and I've heard other survivors use this, and I'm borrowing from them. Honed as a tool, and now I'm a massive weapon against them because I don't have any fear of death. I had many near-death experiences. I know what it's like on the other side. No concern about that whatsoever. So they can't use that fear aspect. And I know a lot of people who just don't have a fear of it because they know, because they're psychically open, they know where they're going, so that drives them crazy because their greatest fear is death, because they also know where they're going, which is not good. And this is why we see all the transhumanist stuff and the robots and the clones and all of that other stuff that, is in the conspiracy theory realm.
Welcome to my
It's
second
to avoid
play.
it.
It's all about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. We're like, oh, here you go. And I completely channeled that. And I was like, then when I started to do my research, I was like, oh, it's real. You've psychically sent me another play. I was like, gosh, but yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yes. And I want to say that, yeah, I would think it was a crying shame. And I think that's why I loved hearing your message that you were using your psychic ability, because it is a massive weapon against the dark. Because if we don't see through the veil, if we don't wake up, it's why I teach black and white rose courses about reclaiming mystery school lineages. And to keep it simple, I've seen really horrible stuff, entities, energy, attachments. I work in those realms, but I've also seen, luckily, what really got me on this spiritual awakening journey was seeing my own Nan come through from the other side in angelic light, such pure source energy when I was first training as an actor. And she put her hand on my back and said to me, "Don't be so afraid," which is profound
Mm.
words now when I really think about the, everything. And it that was the first time I was like, okay, there's no death. Here's my Nan reincarnated. She's in the light. She's an angelic purity. And everything we've been taught is a lie because we're taught death is the end. And here's my Nan, it's beautiful light spirit. And so I've been lucky
Mm.
enough to really see both sides of the spectrum. And so I'm like, I know the light is stronger, and I know that love is stronger, but to not use, and when you speak out about mediumship, there is a lot of backlash about, oh, you're channeling the devil, you're doing this and all of this sort of stuff. And I say, no, no, no. The healers, the psychics, and the mediums can protect you from that. That's half of the work I do.
Yes.
And that if you don't know it's there, you are, it's there anyway, whether you acknowledge it or whether you don't.
Yes. Exactly. So why wouldn't you take up a sword, a psychic sword, to protect yourself and others?
Yeah.
Because they're using it and they won't stop using it. And they have an obsession with using it because so a lot of people who are in positions of power in these ritual spaces will take on an attachment intentionally. I would say incredibly stupid. They think they can control this. They end up being a puppet for this entity. You know, you see people in powerful positions that have this look in the eye, and it's supposed to be a sign of psychopathy, but I actually think it's like the soul inside that's actually screaming for help because it's being puppeted. And the top of the iris will show. It's a bit like when a dog is afraid and you see the white of the eye with a dog. It's the same. Sorry, the top of the white of the eye will show above the iris. I can't remember what they call it. In Japan, they have a specific name for it. So I really shouldn't use names, but you see these people in really high places in the WHO, in American politics, and they when they talk and they do public speaking, the whites of the eye above the iris show, and it looks to me like this terror. It just
I've
looks like terror.
seen that and
It's
wondered
not
what
normal.
that was about. I thought that's really not normal. Can anyone not? Okay, that
So
makes
that's a sign of an attachment.
right.
Mm.
Wow. And you
So
also,
they take on these entities. Sorry, they
no,
take on
no,
these entities because I don't know how you see it, but in my opinion, the demonic uses the audio sensor to communicate. And I know a lot of psychics who do get beautiful clairaudient information from the angelics as well. I shut it down because of what I was used as an intermediary between these things and the humans in these rituals as a child. So it's too terrifying for me. But they have this ability to use the auditory channels, and it's very clear language, and they can speak any language, and they can give very clear instructions. Angelics always use visions, in my opinion, in my experience, where you need to interpret, you need to use your own intelligence, wisdom, interpretation. So you're not having everything all laid out for you. So these idiots that take on these attachments, they get very clear instructions. They don't have their body anymore. They're not in control, that's for sure. But they can get a lot of power because they know what the demonic knows the future. They know what's going to happen. They can make them have enormous amounts of wealth. They could easily help them win the lottery. Although a lot of people think that that's going to make their life better. It never does. It always makes it worse. So there's a whole process to it. There's a whole reason why these people do these things. They're not just playing around with Ouija boards. This is a system, and this is what has controlled the world for a very long time, and it's falling apart for them, which I don't know if you're also picking up on that, but I see it daily.
yeah. So a couple of things. So much. I think there'd be so much to go to. About the clairaudience. Interestingly, it was my strongest sense when I was first waking up. But I got attuned to angelic Reiki, which is part of the reason I talk about what I do, because I was trained to open myself up as a channel. And now, working a lot later, I say to people, please do channel beings, but know what you're channeling and don't open yourself up to it. Channel safely. You don't need to put a being inside. That's something that Crowley would do. Let's enter the being.
Yes.
No. And you need to master the realm to know what you're channeling. But the first thing I channeled when I attuned to the angels, it was a drum and bass song in the 90s. And they said, Gabriel, you've gone too far and you should hang your head in shame. So I was like, okay, so I'm channeling the angel Gabriel, but he needs to hang his head in shame. That's the words I got. So somehow I've always been a bit of a psychic detective, and I was like, it's not right. So I'm the angelic kingdom, there's something off here. Now, what I've come to understand now is that there's fallen angelics and there's higher light angelics, and you just need to know which ones you're working with. And even the named ones have different frequencies that you can tap into. But I find that my clairaudience always sends me sort of cheeky awarenesses, and I can kind of tap into it and go, oh, okay, you're sending me a song frequency, and I can get sent light language. And the light language I get sent helps me heal from entities. So,
Wow.
yeah, I think they abuse all the psychic senses, but actually, I kind of want to laugh back at them and go, but we can use them right back at you. We
Oh,
can use them right back
absolutely.
at
And again, that's my personal preference. I don't use the auditory channels, but I know a lot of beautiful psychics that do get that clairaudient information. One of the reasons I like to share that with people, though, is when you have schizophrenics and people who are supposedly psychotic that say that the devil made them do it,
you.
they are literally hearing voices and they're never telling them nice things. So
Yeah.
that's a good example of, the clairaudient ability, because almost every person that I've ever read for who's had a diagnosis of psychosis or schizophrenia has had an attachment or an entity talking to them and telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And they're all psychic. They're all incredibly psychic.
Yeah.
You do not get these attachments that communicate with individuals unless there's some sort of psychic ability, because you can't pick it up and they can't harass them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say when I was younger, I've heard voices before and I was like, that's not me. The voice to skull technology or the MK Ultra. So there is that kind of hive mind mentality of what a lot of people got sent messages over the last few years as well about what to do, and it was all programming. And I think that's a really great thing to be aware of, because there is a level of voices that you can tune into that are the dropped astral realm for sure. And if you're
Yeah.
listening to those voices, that's going to be psychotic, not going to be very nice. And so it's the same with channeling. And that's why we have to master our supernatural senses. And if you decide, I'm not going near that one, that's not safe, great. That's a high level spiritual warfare practice. But also to know, that actually there is different frequencies to tap into. And one of the highest frequencies is sound, if you can get in there beyond all the chaos, because the chaos energy they're trying to mess with massively. So
Yeah.
yeah, really thank you for bringing that back in, because I think I'm a massive advocate of spiritual warrior work, which is how I kind of linked in with Fergus in the first place, because he was like, oh, you're part of the psychic army, aren't you? Because I was speaking out against someone who had said in a talk that she works with Thoth, the Egyptian god of magic. And I was like, really? Is that a safe practice? And she was like, well, absolutely. And I was like, you just have to question everything. Because personally, I don't believe animal-headed beings should be channeled. I think it's a sign of
No,
the absolute thing that we're fighting.
that's my father's resident. I'll call it a resident demon. Was Anubis, to the point where he had a skull and crossbones, but the dog skull and crossbones for his Facebook icon. I mean, he's so out there with everything that he did, and his name, he used his name for the Facebook page as well. So, and 322, which is the number of these Illuminati scumbags as well. He had that on his Facebook page. And again, that absolute confidence and impunity from prosecution that he could get away with it, that he could put it out there that publicly and be fine. And he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see him as completely soul lost? I mean, was there much humanity left in your father as far as
So
you're
he had alters.
right?
He had alters. So there's a photograph that I've published multiple times now that my two siblings who corroborate that they were abused by him in the same way, corroborate the allegations that I've made. We all call that Evil Max. This particular photograph, he's got a birthday cake in front of him that my mother had cooked for him. And my two oldest sisters, one's deceased now because she spoke out and she got taken out, have both got their hands on his shoulders. And obviously that must have triggered him into that evil, incestuous scum altar part. And you can see it on his face. It's just pure psychopath. There's nothing normal about that face on that man. There's quite a few photographs like that, but that one's really specific. There were times where he seemed really quite befuddled. And there were times where he was very, very sorry for himself. Like he realized that he had gotten himself into something that he couldn't get himself out of. And I had to console him. He ran me over with his car intentionally one day when I was 5 or 6, probably about 5.5. I somehow was not injured. I don't know how. I had a scratch by my eye when he pulled me out roughly from underneath. And then I was forced to sit on his lap while he whispered to me that he wanted to kill me, but he couldn't because he loved me too much. So I'm sitting there. I've just had a near-death experience. My mother's doing the dishes, allowing him to do this, cry to me. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but oh my God. No one took me to the hospital. So, there was part of him, he knew that I was going to take him down at some point.
Right.
Because I don't think he did that with my other siblings, but he did it with me. Actually, no, he did put my two corroborating siblings, they've got put into very, very dangerous positions as well. But he didn't run them over with his car. He did that with another family member later, but, that was part of what he would do. So I did feel sorry for him at times, not then, but at other times I felt sorry for him because I could see that there was something, like I said, his maternal grandfather was Grand President of the Grand Lodge. So what chance did he have? He would have been initiated at a very early age. It just certainly doesn't justify any of the things that he did.
Which says so much. I've said to you before when we spoke last about your strong, like how you're, such. I wouldn't say, 'cause to me, it doesn't seem like you're in survival mode, you're in thriving. You're like, okay, there's a warrior strength to you, which I think is beautiful. And, that's what I saw in you straight away. I was like, my God, she's exposing the truth and in a really strong psychic way. And you said to me it was about you're just very, very determined.
Very.
Yeah, which
Born in
is
the year of the ox and very stubborn. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and it just makes me feel like your soul came down to take on such a huge mission. And it takes a warrior soul to do something like that. Because I always say, I don't think I could have done it if it happened to me in this lifetime. I'm not sure. But because I've seen it in previous lifetimes, I was like, oh, I've come back now. Stop messing with me. I've come back now and I've remembered and I'm on it.
Yeah.
But I just always take my hats off to people that go, God, to go through stuff in this lifetime and still speak out, still be psychically strong. Hats off to you. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And beyond that, you've set up a whole movement. So how did Ley Love Down come to you? I know from your own experience, but it's a beautiful thing that you're doing. Powerful.
It is a beautiful thing.
Mm.
Yeah. So I started teaching a psychic development course and I tested it out on a group of friends. They were sweet enough to come along and that was very kind of them. So, and I taught them some of the lessons that I had. And one of them was that we can see ley lines. So there is a kind of light receptor in the human retina called a cryptochrome. And the CRY2 cryptochrome is the same as that birds and insects have. And we already know that birds and insects use their cryptochromes to navigate using ley lines. So we can see them. There's a National Library of Medicine article on that, a study. And there's a lot of studies. There's a gentleman called Robin Baker. This poor guy has been studying this for such a long time. And he's been academically trolled mercilessly for daring to bring this out. And I don't remember the exact quote, but he did say at one point that the dichotomy between these replicable studies and this evidence and the absolute determination of some individuals to try and tear him down for even bringing it out is just phenomenal. And I believe it's because those that have these secret society rituals do not want plebeians, you know, those of us that aren't in the society, that aren't in the club, they don't want us to know about this information. Every single church that you see, and this is what explains why so many of them are so weirdly oriented on a block of land in relation to the other buildings around them. Every single church is sited on a ley line by a Freemason using a sighting rod. So these are all visual terms. They know that they're visible. They just don't want us to know that they're visible. So I taught this in the course, and one of the course members asked, why was I sharing that? And that just started this massive download. And it took a few months, and I just got more and more, well, it's for this reason, it's for that reason. And then I had an epiphany one day where, oh my God, I was actually in the portal spaces when they were doing these things. And they, of course, because the unaliving, I knew that death opened a portal so that, you know, that soul can pass into whichever dimension its soul frequency is equal to. So it just all suddenly came to me and all got pieced together. And then I had this download. I had an interview organised with a gentleman who's quite well known over where you are, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. He was using a platform that I don't normally use, and we just didn't quite get it organised. And around that date, I think it was actually the day before, I had actually interviewed with a mutual friend, Ben Hawkes.
Yeah.
And prior to that, so I had two interviews, one day after another, with two gentlemen from the UK. And in the lead up, because I didn't know Ben well at all at that point, I only just had an email or few with him. I'd had this, you will meet this English gentleman, and you will get all of this information about the ley lines out. Now, I thought it was this other gentleman. Didn't work out. Turned out it was Ben. And he actually asked me in the interview some questions about why is, you know, can't even remember how it happened. The interview's on his Wake Up podcast. But it just sort of started from there. So we had this conversation. I talked about, you know, my passion with sharing this information, because I believe we've been stuck in the third dimension for much longer than we should have been because of these rituals.
Yeah.
And that I believe that as we come into permanent harmony time, which is happening in December of this year, so the ley lines normally come into harmony 4 times of the year. You mentioned the solstices and equinoxes earlier and how significant they are to their rituals. Mm. We are coming into this permanent time. Normally they would only harmonize on those solstices and equinoxes. And for a while it was for, you know, hours or days, or you know, then it stretched out to many, many days either side. And then it was 45 days recently. And then a wonderful man called Rory Duff has described that coming up in December this year, it's going to be permanent. We're going to have permanent harmony time, which is so significant. And prior to that, I've kept hearing about us coming into 5D, and I kept thinking fairy tale, you know, this is the love and light stuff, and it's not really my area. Now I can see how that is possible. In my opinion, the ley lines are 5th dimensional frequency because they carry the Akashic information in them as well. So everything's sort of kind of all slotted in together at the same time perfectly. So Ben and I had that conversation in December of 2023, and then Ben just ran with it. Like, it's amazing.
He's
He has
phenomenal.
so many incredible people together. It just blows my mind. He's got a very, very good knack or ability for organisation. So we have these incredible volunteers who've come on board. So we're not just doing this alone. We may have been the co-founders, but we've got these incredible people who've come in who are giving talks, doing meditations, group meditations, trying very hard to get this information. We've got a beautiful website, www.leylovedown, all lowercase.com. beautiful woman has put that together for us. So it's becoming quite phenomenal. So the whole premise behind it is to get out into these ley lines. And if you want to learn how to see them, if you follow me on social media, I share a lot about how to do that. It's very simple. You find these perfect circles in nature where you wouldn't normally see them, particularly in pathways. Nobody's out there with a brush cutter making these perfect circles in these paths in endemic forest. It's natural. And that's where the ley lines are. So plants and trees don't like to grow within them. So you can follow these ley lines for long stretches. In my country, the original people call them song lines, and they have a different frequency. So I believe they can also hear the different frequency, and they also sing in them.
Wow.
So what we're doing with Ley Love Down is we're trying to help people to not only identify where the ley lines are, but to get out in them and to bring in joy, however you want to express joy, that doesn't hurt anybody, obviously, with sound frequency or dance, whichever makes you feel wonderful, makes you feel happy. It's the expression of joy and joyful sound, like 432 hertz music, in those spaces that balance out the horrible negative frequencies that have been placed in them for millennia. There's also the much more significant and important work of psychopumping, which is very necessary, and we've got a team of people doing that as well, to clear these poor trapped souls, because when you have an unaliving of that sort of magnitude, they can get stuck. And that's part of the magic, is to intentionally keep that misery, that constant reliving of that experience in that location for perpetuity. That's the whole point. So I take my hat off to you, because obviously you've been doing this for a while. I came into this, I do that myself, but I just didn't know what the term was.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for probably 10 years. But I know you've been doing it for a lot longer. And
No, not longer
obviously you've
than
been,
10 years. Yeah,
oh
no,
wow. Okay.
it's been about 10 years since my wake up to everything. So I've always been a spiritual soul,
Wow.
very trapped, very much in the 3D. And so it's only been the last, yeah, 9 to 10 years that before
Wow.
these realms weren't alive. And even, I have to be honest, the last sort of 4 years were my massive wake up call to the warrior side of the work, where I was like, oh, okay, I'm going in, I'm going in. And losing my dad a couple of years ago and seeing through the veil about where souls get stuck, when they die in hospital, when they die medicated. And I spoke about that, Fergus's talk about trapped souls. That's what I was on there for, speaking about. And, that this is the level of work we need to do. And it was Ben that I was chatting to afterwards. I was like, oh, yeah, the lands, and yeah, we need to sing on them, but there's also all these souls that stuck. So, what are you doing about that? And we had a massive chat about all of that. But I want to say I have a lot of healers, a lot of land workers, a lot of people that are doing this work in some ways. And so they can come and connect with you as well. And so it's
Yes,
basically a
please.
growing movement, isn't it? So I'm going
Yes.
to link in
Yeah.
Ley Love Down as well. But I just know so many people that are doing very different work in different ways. So many people come to me and go, how do I get involved in this work? So I very much want to say to people, this exists. I know
Yes.
Giles over here, who I'm going to be chatting to soon, who has the World Healing Project. He has the perpetual choirs which sing on the lands. And it feels like there's so many joining together of people all doing the work. And I feel in some ways you're creating a hub for a lot of people joining together and having I want to say a congregation space, but I don't want to use that word because I mean it in a sacred congregation space. So,
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the most beautiful parts of it, because obviously the last 4 years, a lot of people have PTSD just from existing for the last 4 years with all this crazy stuff that's been going on, which I think is all part of the fact that they knew they were losing their grip and they
yeah,
were not going to have. I keep alluding to it, but never quite clearly saying it. So as we come into this fifth dimensional frequency in my belief system, these puppeting entities won't be as comfortable on the surface. And they may have to go underground to escape. But that means that those are on the surface, they won't be puppeted anymore. So they knew this was coming, and they were trying with all the fear, these anti-fundamentalist things that they put in people's arms. All of that was all to try and dumb us down, keep us in that fear frequency, to stop this shift, but it can't be stopped. This shift is happening. I mean, I had a download in September that the veil is pretty much disintegrated. In fact, I got told it's gone, which didn't make sense to me. But previous to that, I'd kept being shown that these little ones that are coming in now will never have the veil. And I was shown that 1 or 2 years ago and didn't make sense at the time. Now it does, because I believe the veil is gone. So it's another really important reason why people need to be woken up to the significance of things like ley lines, and that nature spirits will show themselves around the leys in humanoid apparitions or animal apparitions, because otherwise they're going to think they're crazy, the poor
Right.
things. So, you know, nature wants to communicate with us because nature's saying, help, help, I need you to help, I need you to engage. So if you're one of those people who sees faces in clouds or faces in trees and things, you're not crazy. It's what original peoples across the world have believed for
Mm.
millennia, for tens, 20s, 30,000 years. It's part of culture. In so many different cultures, it's so important and intrinsic to that culture. But in Western culture, it's schizophrenia or psychosis, or it's some sort of pathology. Because, oh, good grief, you can't be psychic. That's mental.
Mm. Yeah. And it's, and
Mm.
I agree with you. I think we're in such a massive shift. And I think so many of us can feel it going, what is going on? I think this year has been phenomenal, like the shifts and the changes. But I also feel that this is the third awakening. So for some, it's going to feel like, oh wow, oh God, it's getting easier now. But for others, it's going to get harder, depending where you
Yeah,
are on the scale, because the veil is dropped. It means that you can see both sides of it, and it's that wake up to, oh, the world wasn't what I thought it was, and that can be a really difficult process. And I know it was for me. I was so, I've kind of been quite innocent all my life, and I've had to let people let me down and then go, oh my God, I trusted, oh, what an idiot. And so there's that kind of wave of that, and also being on the spiritual journey and just being up there in the love and light, and it's all clouds and fairies and bubbles. And it's like, it is that, but it's
yeah,
also this. So I think there's a lot of people going to
yeah,
go through that, or maybe not need to go on an awakening. Maybe it's not their lifetime to do it. So I think all of that exists. But because we are changing vibration, because we are have won this spiritual war, it's like that density, that's why the psychopomp work is happening, because it's got to go somewhere. Because
yes,
filth has got to come off our planet. And I've been saying that for a while. We can't shift into this vibration with harm to children, with magical abuse. We can't accept that that's going on. And once you go, this is not acceptable. That those words, I do not consent, is so important to break that karmic law back and hand it back to people. Well, you carry it then. If you want to do deeds, never mind the mind control, the soul control, the level of soul control that they do on magical rituals. No people that take part in that can be blamed for that, because they've been controlled. So this is part of the thing that I talk about handing it back to the people that are like, you started the magical abuse, you take that karma and you carry it and you take it up to the divine and you deal with it, because humanity needs
yeah,
their divine template back down here. So off you
yes,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so you've got some conferences coming up as well. So what else are you up to?
I have, so I feel so blessed. So in June of this year, I really wanted to go to a place. It's a beautiful, big sacred rock in the middle of Australia called Uluru. It's sacred to Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you know it.
Yes, I know. I have somebody that was writing about the sacred sites and the chakras, and Uluru came up in that. So I studied it. I was helping her channel her book. So that, but for
Fabulous.
some reason, it just touched my soul when you said the name. I was like, oh, Uluru. Yeah.
Well, two dragon lines, which are the most significant of the ley lines, and there's only a small number of dragon lines on the planet. And where they cross, they create chakra points. So Uluru's right in the smack bang of these two powerful dragon lines.
Wow.
So I wanted to go in June. I couldn't, just wasn't going to work out. And then I got invited to a conference there for December. So it was just, and it was just so synchronistically, this is the way you mentioned before that, you know, I seem very strong. I have a guide system that has kept me going my entire life. I mean, I've got shoved in a tunnel on a regular basis for my sensory deprivation training as a child, where I thought I was going to die. It was very small, it was very dark, so cold. And this light came in, and it would give me information. It showed me what was going to happen and made me realize I needed to survive. At one point, my father came to get me out of the tunnel, and I didn't want to leave. I was furious. So that gives me the strength, because I had those experiences and they still work with me now. So this is the way, when you work with spirit and it's beautiful, loving entities, benevolent, and you want to do something, they will make it happen for you. So this was just completely out of the blue. I hadn't shared this with anybody that I wanted to go to this space. It just happened. So that's where I'm going in December for the permanent harmony of the ley lines, the moment where this occurs in 20th to the 22nd of December at Uluru. So it's called the Cosmic Consciousness Conference. And for me to speak that very slowly because it's a mouthful. And there's some beautiful, beautiful people speaking there. For those who know me, who might watch this, my dear friend who I found out is actually related, a gentleman called Doug McIntyre. He's presenting at the conference. Dr. Ardis is presenting. There's some really incredible, Craig Cole, amazing people. So that's happening. And I've also got a conference happening in January called the Sky to Earth podcast or conference with my dear friends Dale Holmes and Madeline Doherty. So that's another one that's coming up as well.
And
they've also got an amazing.
And have you got your own website apart from Ley Love Down?
Yes, I do.
Yes,
Yeah, I
I'll
have.
get you to send them both over so I can put in the links.
Thank you. I will do. That's Sixth Science. I'm on Sixth Sense.
Yeah, yeah. Your website is
Sixth Science, so it's number 6, TH Science. Yeah. The pun on Sixth Sense, but it's me proving there's a science to this work. That there's replicable things that you can do to prove that humans have these extra senses and these abilities. So that's what I teach also in my course.
Yeah, beautiful. And I want to say I watched one of your videos about reading ley lines and seeing where they part. And I'd done a couple of bits of work, one in Luton, where I'm based at the moment. I'm born in Luton in England, and they're actually going through a process of building a Luton henge, a monument for the sacred site. And I'd gone up there and walked the ley lines and actually sat somewhere where a triple murder had gone on, and I just was very cool to sit on that land and work with it. And I remember Ben messaged me and said, "Oh, you're sitting right on the ley line there. You know that?" He said, "I think I can see it." And I was like, "No, you're right. I just sense a ley line from where does my body want to go?" And I was sitting, and it was in a parting as well. I was like, "Oh, yeah, this all makes sense." But I also went to Hampstead Heath with a beautiful group of people, and we were at the top of a mound, and I was a remote viewing going, "Oh, there's been child sacrifice here." And interesting from what you said earlier about it happening the day, I was like, how did it get away with happening here? This is so public, but I could just sense it happened. And what happened was the people that I was with were all stood in a massive circle with me, and they were like, "No, name what you're seeing. We're ready to receive it." And I was sort of staying, and we all managed to clear it by holding hands and sort of opening up this portal. And I remember that was only about a month ago, and I remember thinking times have changed, that people can step in and really receive this work, and that people are tapping in themselves and becoming really, really aware. So yeah, I want to say again, thank you for what you do. And I really feel like I know people that would want to connect with you and your work. I know they're going to want to follow the ley lines. And the fact that you use your psychic skills for the greater good is just such a blessing. And I know that the divine is standing with you so strong. And for that reason, I just want to celebrate your soul and the warrior strength it took to get here, and to now transition into brighter times for you, which you totally deserve and is necessary. And I think that's uplifting for a lot of people, certainly for a lot of people that haven't got the bravery to speak out about what's happening to them. And I know that happens a lot. As a soul reader, I see it a lot in sessions. I can see it in people's timelines. I can see it in this timeline. But because of my level of understanding of abuse, I always say to them, my soul stepping back, invite me in if you want me to see something, because I won't view it if you don't want me to, because I will not break the laws, because I know that they use psychics to see through the veil. So I always say, I go third eye blind until you say I can come in, because your soul might be okay with it, but I want you and your soul to be okay with it. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I know so many people who work in our profession who just want to be right, and they'll just fling stuff out, and if you have blocked something out, there's a really good reason for that.
mm,
And there'll be a time, hopefully, when it will come out that you can cope with. But if you force it out, this is why I really don't recommend people go off and have hypnosis. Because if it's forced out, all your coping mechanisms might not work. You might not be able to manage with it. So thank you. Thank you for doing that, because you do have to tread lightly with that sort of work. You really do. And thank you for what you do, because I know that's not easy work.
mm,
I know I put my hand up to come into this lifetime to do this work, but I also kind of, it's not like I can just step away and pretend it didn't happen. So it's sort of, it's entrenched and it needs to be done. But yeah, I take my hat off to anybody who does this sort of work, especially the psychopumping, because it can be draining if you don't know what you're doing properly. I've learned over the last 10 years to do it in a way that has efficacy, because the guides that I work with do most of the work. All I have to do is ask them to do it.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's how it should be. That's the team that we have. It's like,
Yeah.
help me out. And I guess that leads me full circle to the other side of, use the lights on your side. The spiritual team are there, which I think is why it's so important you don't shut down your gifts, because if you need it, then call them in. And that's what I learned. And I lost my path on the warrior work for a while, where I started to mistrust and who could I call on? And then it was like, oh my God, I've got such a big team. You Wally, use them. And so that's
Yeah.
just a lovely
Yeah.
reminder. It's like they'll do it for you, but because they are on the side of the divine, they will not break free will. So you have to ask and go, can you help me here? And
Exactly.
off they go. So, yes, that's a reminder. Please call in your team for the divine. They want to help us, and they can, and it can make life so much easier than us going, oh, I'll do it alone. I'll do it alone. You don't need to do it alone. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. People don't realize they're assigned with a whole group of guides that want to work with them. But if we don't ask for them to help, and I always say qualify that with, if you ask for something, say if that's for my highest good to protect yourself. But if you don't ask them for help, they can't act. So, this is why people wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning all the time, because they want you to ask them for help.
Was that why I woke up at 3 this morning? Did I need it? I think when you said that, I thought, Spirit's giving me a tap through you. I think you're
It's so
right.
common. It's so common, especially now, because I believe we've come into a free will period where soul contracts also are dissolving.
Yeah.
Like we're at this incredible juncture. I mean, I do hear other psychics talking about it now. I've been talking about it for a long time, but it's wonderful to see so many other psychics recognizing this is huge. What we're coming through, this shift is massive. So people should hopefully take heart
Mm.
from that fact. The shift is massive. It's a major change. If you're interested in Hindu prophecies, you look at it as one of the yugas. We're going from that satanic one into the golden age. That's the way I see it. So this is a big positive shift.
Oh, wow. Wow. That feels like a beautiful place to leave it, unless you have anything else that you want to share.
No,
Then,
just thank you so much for having me.
yeah, and it's been such a pleasure. I love connecting with you. I love your soul frequency and what you're about. So it's been such a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you.